Hello, in this video we're going to talk about figures. Figures are different from notes in the sense that figures relate to what the shape of a note is like. For example, here we have three notes that are the same. These are all A, but the figures are different because these are two crotchets or quarter notes, and this is a minim or a half note. Here, for example, we have that the four figures are the same. They are crotchets or quarter notes, but the notes are different. This is an A, this is an A, and this is a C, and this is another C. This is all to know the difference between note and figure, but in this video we're going to talk about figures, not about notes. As we said before, these are crotchets or quarter notes. I said crotchets because in Britain we call it crotchets, and in America and other places they call it quarter notes. So quarter notes and crotchets are the same. And we start with quarter notes because they are the ideal figures to take as units. And we are not going to talk about time signatures in this video, except for this 4x4. That means that this 4 tells you the number of specific figures in a bar, and this 4 here in the denominator tell us which kind of figures. So 4 quarter notes or 4 crotchets. That means that in every bar we're going to accommodate 4 crotchets or quarter notes or equivalent. Each figure has a head, and most of the figures have a stem. These are the stems here. The stems could be pointing up or down. If I put, for example, a note that is higher, the stem is more likely to be pointing down. And if I put a note that is rather low, the stem is likely to be pointing up. You just use your common sense to make sure that the stem is always more rather inside the stuff. Here we have a case in which we have stems pointing up and down. That is because I'm writing two melodies in the same stuff. When we do that, we differentiate one melody from the other by putting the higher melody with all the stems pointing up and the lower melody with all the stems pointing down. Now that in this bar we have 4 crotchets or quarter notes, we're going to start finding other figures that can be equivalent to that. For example, I can take the equivalent of 2 quarter notes and make with it a minim or half note that we can see here. I can also take these 2 and replace it by 1 minim or half note. So in this 4x4 bar I can fit 2 half notes or minims. I can also take these 4 crotchets or quarter notes and replace it with a semi-brief or whole note, which is this one here. This covers a whole bar. I need to change temporarily this 4 by 4 into a 4 by 2 in order to show you another figure that is not in use anymore, but if you are studying for the ABRSM theory test grade 5, you need to know it because they still use it. I'm talking about the brief or double whole note, which is this one here. But we very rarely will use it for our grade 5 theory test. But let's go to our 4 by 4 to see if these crotchets can be divided into other smaller figures. And in fact, I'm going to take one here and I'm going to divide it in quavers or 8 notes. So I can take any of these crotchets and divide it into quavers like these ones. I can take at the same time one of the quavers or 8 notes and divide it in half, creating 2 semiquavers or 16th notes. I perhaps can take all the quavers and subdivide them into 16th notes or semiquavers. I can also take one of the semiquavers and subdivide it into 2 demisemiquavers or 32nd notes, like these 2 here. I can even take one demisemiquaver and subdivide it into 2 hemidemisemiquavers or 64th notes, like these 2 here. Now we're going to talk about ties. If I take this note and I link it together with this line called tie to the next note, then I have to extend the sound of this crotchet to the next one. So writing this will be the equivalent of writing this. So this is called a tie, but the tie connects 2 notes that are the same, and for example, if this note was different like here, then this is not a tie, because tie need to connect 2 notes that are the same. I could have 1 crotchet and 2 quavers, and I could connect this note to this note to have this and extend the duration of this crotchet into a bit more the duration of a quaver. So this together will last the equivalent of 1 crotchet plus a quaver, or 1/4 note plus an 1/8 note. A tie can also be useful to connect 2 notes that are in different bars, like this one. I would like to write a half note or a minimum here to make this last 2, but I can't because there is a change of bar here. So the only way to do it is by using a tie. Now let's go back to this crotchet tied to a quaver here. So this is the value of, say, 1 bit plus half a bit. There is another way to write that, a dotted crotchet. Here we have that this is a solitary quaver. That's why the hand is just hanging there, because it's not holding from another quaver. And what we have here is that this crotchet or quarter note lasts 1 beat plus half a beat, and half a beat is the equivalent to a quaver. So figures can be dotted figures, and this is a minimum or half note and can be also dotted. For example, if we want to write this with a tie, we have this, and this lasts 2 beats plus 1 beat, because the tie is the equivalent of addition in music. We can replace this tie by writing a dot on the minimum or half note. So this lasts 3 beats. Here I have a quaver or 8th note, and here I have a semiquaver or 16th note. I could tie them both together, and then I have 1.5 quaver here. I could replace these 2 figures if I put a dot here, and then I have a dotted quaver or dotted 8th note, and then I have a semiquaver or 16th note here. Now I want to quick talk about the double dot. I might want to have, for example, this sound extended from here up to here, and then have the next hit here, like this. Then if I have here 3 crotchets or quarter notes, I can replace them by a dotted minimum or dotted half note, and then tied to the next 8th note or quaver. But I can do this in a more simplified way, a double dot. So that extends the duration of this to a half of it plus a quarter of it. I might want to extend the duration of this note up to here, so the next hit comes here. Then I use the ties, but that is really difficult to read, so I can replace this crotchet or quarter note by a double dotted quarter note or double dotted crotchet. Now when I want to represent a silent equivalent to a note, for example this is a crotchet in A, but I want to, for example, nothing at all to sound here but still taking the space, I replace this with a rest. So I can replace a crotchet or quarter note with its equivalent of a quarter note rest or crotchet rest. That means that here we take the space, the length in time of a crotchet with no sound, and each figure has its equivalent in rests. And now we're going to see one by one. So this is the rest for a crotchet or quarter note. If I don't want this note to sound, I replace it for a quaver rest, this one. That means that the hand of this quaver or eighth note is going to be released, so it's going to be hanging. We also have a rest for a half note or minim. If we want this to be silenced, we replace it by a minim rest, which is this one here, usually resting on the 1, 2, 3rd line of the staff. If we want a whole note or a semi-brief to be silenced, we replace it with a semi-brief rest, which is this one here, is a rectangle hanging from the 1, 2, 3, 4th line. I can also replace one semiquaver or 16th note by a rest, like this one. If I have a demisemiquaver or 32nd note, I can replace it with a rest, and it will look something like this. If I have a hemi-demisemiquaver or 64th note, like this one, I can also replace it by a rest, and it will look like this.